Hello. Today we are going to be wrapping up, I think, December and January reading, unless I just end up getting super chatty about these December books I'm about to cover. I think I'm just going to combine them because the end of the year always makes wrap-ups a little awkward because by the time I've gotten through the end and beginning of the year content, we're already like a good way through January. So I think that this year I'm just going to combine December and January into one reading wrap up. So you've already heard about 6 of the books that I read in December. All of them are in the Christmas reading vlog I did, so I will mostly just point you there. But I reread A Kiss from Midwinter by Courtney Milan, as I do every year, Wedding Night by Katie Wilde, and then I read for the first time Hogfather by Terry Pratchett, The Winter Spirits, edited by Bridget Collins, I believe, but it has a bunch of different authors. Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret by Benjamin Stevenson, and Murder at the Holly House by Denzel Mayrick. So if you want details about all of these, you can go check that vlog out. I would say these 2 were my favorites, but I always love reading Christmas books, and it was a good excuse. Several of them off of my TBR that had been hanging out there. So the other 4 books that I read in December were all new reads. Let's start with the 2 arcs, one of which is like shamefully overdue for me to have read, and that was Primal Mirror by Nalini Singh, which I did not advance read because right when I was supposed to be advanced reading this was right when I was having the great slumpage of 2024 where I just got really overwhelmed with life, with reading. I've had a big block on this book for the whole year because it just represents that I'm falling behind in the podcast that I have going about this series. I have told myself already that I'm not gonna do full podcast episodes about this or the last book because I'm just behind. I need to reread them with that lens before I do an episode. So I'm kind of just trying to give myself permission there. But this book just was kind of hanging over my head the whole year. And I was like, I cannot go into 2025 with this book unread. So I did finally read it, Primal Mirror. And I don't know if it's because I've been having that expectation of dread kind of over it, but this is probably one of my least favorite in the series, definitely of the newer, like the season 2. Mostly because I think, well, there's 3 things that come to mind, and if you've not read the series, these critiques don't make a ton of sense, but I'll just put them out there. One is I just personally don't love a baby trope. So that was already, for the romance side of things, kind of a ding to me. The other thing is that I didn't really buy the romance between the 2 leads. Like, it kind of kicks into high gear after the baby is born. And I don't know. I liked the characters, and I like that we have a new pack. And it's in the Smokies, which is where I'm from. So I'm not like against that. I just think part of the coziness of this series after you've been reading it for a while is you get to know the characters and like all the things that have built up. And I think it would behoove the series to spend some time in one of these new groups that have been established. Like, I think when she goes back to the Bear Shifter clan, that tends to be pretty successful, like the Russia stuff. We've spent enough time with them that it feels cozy still. The third thing is just what keeps happening in this season is the Cynet is on the brink of collapse, and then they have a short-term fix. And it's on the brink of collapse, and then a short-term fix. I just think that cycle kind of needs to stop. Like, I think we need to get to the solution because I just think it's losing some of its tension because it keeps happening. So I think that this season needs some new conflict on the macro level to make the books a little bit more successful. Because the thing is that the romances are very repetitive at this point, but if you have characters you like and then enough of a macro plot, it kind of distracts from that. So yeah, it's still Nalini Singh, it's still Side Changeling. I still enjoyed it. I just think if I'm being critical of it, not one of the more successful books in the series, in my opinion. But at least I've read it, and so it's not hanging over my head anymore. And I'm excited for the next one. I will always be excited for a new Side Changeling book. The other arc I read was Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And I've decided I'm not going to give this a star rating because I just think this book is, I think, a good version of what it is, but what it is something I don't enjoy. So if I had, like, my objective rating of it is probably like a 4-star. My subjective rating of it is probably like a 1.5 or a 2. And I just don't think that feels fair to the book because, I mean, I guess in this sense, I have been taught by Grady Hendrix to expect high camp commentary, like interesting commentary, and like really good, strong female characters and like interesting, messy female characters that I think he does very well, which he delivers in this book. But there's no camp, really. And then he usually has a pretty, if it's going to be a paranormal story, that is present strongly. And this is very low paranormal. So like it says witchcraft. I was expecting a lot of witchiness. I would say that there was very little for what I was expecting based on his past stuff. And so it's mostly just the realistic horror of what this group of girls is going through. And they are all in the 70s at this home for unwed mothers in Florida. And it is essentially about the horrors of child abuse. Like it's every kind of child, you know, mental, emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual, like every kind of child abuse is what this book is. And that's just something I don't like to read about. I would say there's been hard elements of things that have been abusive towards children in his other books, but the main characters were not children in the same way. I guess My Best Friend's Exorcism is the exception of what I've read, but like I'm thinking particularly in Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Imagine if that book was happening from the perspective of the kids the vampire is hurting. That's what this book felt like for me, and that's just something that's too, like, I need one step between me and the kids. It just is very not something I like to read. And other people will, and I don't want to deter people from reading this because I think it's a good version of what it is. It just was too realistic for what I want in horror. And, you know, I think it is a departure from what I have expected from him in the past. So I want people to know that too. Oh, and also there's a lot of traumatic birth, pregnancy stuff. So if that's also something you don't want to read about or can't read about, just know that. So anyway, I'm not going to give it an official rating because I just don't think I'm the right reviewer for it. But those are my thoughts, and I did read it. So there you go. Okay. Then the 2 books, just random books I read the latest bind-up of Monstrous, which honestly, kind of similar to my critiques of the Nalini Singh book, I do think that we had a really big step forward towards concluding this arc in the last bind-up, which I appreciated. I hope that continues because I think the series is losing some momentum at this point. Like, I think we need to kind of have a wrap on this story. Also, I don't know if you guys can hear this cat. This cat is just absolutely losing his mind. I don't know why, but there you go. I apologize if that's distracting to you. It is distracting to me too. So anyway, Monstrous, I just think we need to start wrapping this line of things up, and then once this arc concludes, start a new one, because it's a cool world. I love the art, I like the perspective, I like all of it. I just think that this arc has kind of run its course and needs to be wrapped up. So 3.5, still good, still enjoyed, will continue to read, but would benefit from an ending. And then I discovered the Erotic Book Club podcast, which is an old Dropout show, have been loving. And for the books where I thought, oh, I might actually like that, I'm trying to read the books. So there's only so far been one that I've been like, I definitely want to read that. And that was a Viking's Peace by Zoe York. And It's Vikings in space, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely want to read this. It's well done, but it is a weird situation, and it was written in 2014. I don't know if it had the same sort of if Viking separatist had the same kind of alt-right implication to it that it does in 2024, but I kept being very distracted by like, what are the politics of these Viking separatists? Why did they leave Earth to start Viking culture up again? It feels like that's something they do because they are words I can't say on YouTube. I don't think that was, I'm not sure that was the author's intention, but I found that very distracting. Anyway, the Spent was fine. It was a cool world. I would read more. 3 stars. Looking forward to listening to the book club about it. Okay, I don't think that was quite enough to merit its own video. So we will go ahead and combine December and January. So I'll throw you to January now because this was December.
Hello, and welcome to January reading wrap-up time. I am having one of the worst days of fatigue I've had in a very long time with my autoimmune disease. The idea of having to keep my head up long enough to film makes me sad. So I am prostrate, and I'm just going to do a voiceover for January. So the cool thing is all of my graphs work for just the month of January. So I will show you an abundance of graphs in this video, or in this part of the video, just because I can. So I read a total of 11 books, which feels low, but I am in the middle of a few books, which is a little unusual for me. But anyway, I finished 11 books. So you can see that there was a nice spread of genre. Surprisingly, general fiction, I guess, was my biggest read category. You can also see in the distribution of the ratings that this wasn't necessarily like my best month, but I was purposely doing a DNFing kind of project, so that makes sense. My average rating, if you include the DNFs, was 2.85, but without the DNFs, it was 3.56, and you can really see a lot of clustering around the 3.5, and 4-star range. Books location. Man, I was reading a lot of fantasy set things and things in the US, though I did have one in Japan and one in Australia. Most were first reads, and then, interesting. So a lot of these were not like me in some meaningful way. That's good to see. And yeah, here's the distribution of where I got the books from. Here is where authors were from. And yeah, I think those were the most interesting graphs. So anyway, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that the graphs, I didn't have to do any manipulation for the graphs to reflect my rating for the month. Okay, so then let's talk about the books that I read. So here are the 11 books that I finished. Like I said, overall finished or like read enough to DNF, I should say. I would say this wasn't a great reading month in terms of finding like faves, but I feel like I was reading a lot of things that were good and matched my mood, which is, kind of the goal. So I'm not going to really get into the ones that I read for my On the Chopping Block video. I'll just refer you to that. That was How to Survive Your Own Murder, Blood, Sugar, and Glory. I would say if I had to pick a favorite book of the month, it might be How to Survive Your Own Murder, because that was just fun and well done. So, thumbs up there. In terms of advanced reader copies, I'm going to say I was pretty disappointed by I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm in a Rom-Com by Kimberly Lemming. The title is so camp and so fun. And I was, it's self-aware, which I liked that. And I was into it for the first, third. But then it just turns into erotica. And I just feel like it wasn't, I don't know. I wasn't sold on this being a real book versus just, pure smut. And there's nothing wrong with pure smut, but that's not really how it's being sold. The premise is our main character gets abducted, as the title suggests, by aliens when she is being killed by this lion that's going to eat her. She's like a zoologist, or she's getting her PhD in animal science of some kind. And this lion is like killing her, and she gets abducted by aliens like in that minute. So they also abduct the lion, and the lion she ends up being able to talk to and is far and away the best character in the book. But then like she gets put into this world, or she like escapes, but she goes to this world that has like dinosaurs and these other sentient beings. And then there's some sort of like mating thing. And I don't know. It just, she's in a throuple with these two guys. And I just feel like she was an okay character, but at least she felt developed. The men felt like they had zero development. So it's sort of just like makes it feel more like smut versus, a spicy book. I don't know. Anyway, I had higher hopes because I really liked the I Got Drunk And series. And those I feel like the male characters did have more development. So it felt more like a real story. So yeah, not my favorite. I don't know that I would continue in that series for myself, but if you're in the mood for, an immediate Eiffel Tower situation upon meeting two strangers, this might be a book for you. Who knows? And then Bonded in Death by J.D. Robb. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's an in-depth book, guys. I like them. I will say my expectations for this particular book were higher than normal because it was being pitched as sort of like one of the like big cases in the series, which if you have read the series, there are these books that are like more substantial than others in terms of like their place in the lore of the world. I'm thinking of like the Icove case, or the book where they go and like confront like Eve's mother situation. Like they're like books where we get a lot of backstory basically. And this is kind of being set up as one like that for Somerset. And I don't feel like that really was what ended up happening. Like, we do get some good Somerset backstory. We do, I think there's some really nice moments with him and Eve. Like, that's nice. But the case itself is good. It's solid. Like, it's a perfectly good in-depth plot. But it didn't feel like it had that extra special sauce that those sort of, like, blockbuster milestone books in the series do, which is kind of what I feel like we've been needing for a while. So in that sense, it felt a little disappointing, but again, it's an in-depth book. It was very entertaining. I don't know that it's like kind of a assassin spy kind of story. I don't know that it was like the best version of that, but I think it was an entertaining, like good book. So yeah, good, but not great. And I was thinking this was going to be a great one. So like, for instance, I don't think this was as good as either of the two that came out last year, if that gives you some sense. So anyway, those are the two advanced reader copies that I read for the month. So then everything else kind of is just random. So I decided that I was curious about these, Laurie Gilmore small town contemporaries that have been so popular the last year or two. So I got the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, and I really liked it. I gave it 4. Quality wise, it's probably a 3, but it just was exactly what I needed to like start my year off. I think what is interesting about it is that it is both truly a small town contemporary and has those kinds of cozy vibes. And then also it truly had like legit smut in it. And that's kind of an unusual combo, which is why I think this series probably is doing well. Because usually if you get the small town contemporary, like, yes, there'll be sexy scenes, but they're not really like book talk smut worthy. They're a little more discreet, I would say. These were like, multiple full-on sex scenes. And it's about like a really sheltered girl who works at the bookstore, and she's never really had like a lot of luck in love. The guy has been like pining for her, but he doesn't think he's good enough for her. He's a little bit younger, and he kind of thinks of himself as like a fuck up, and so he'd like, she's too good for him kind of a thing, and they end up like, plot mechanics put them together. They end up like developing a relationship. And I just thought it was really nice, like to have the coziness and then also some smut. It's an interesting combo. I kind of feel like small town contemporaries are ready to like have a resurgence, because they were hot about 10 years ago. And then I think people kind of got, small towned out. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just because of the state of the world and people are looking for cozy things in general in books right now, but it feels like it's their time to have another moment. And I can see why this series was a hit. I don't know that the writing is that great. It's a little clunky, but I don't know. It hit the spot, man. It had a certain X factor to it. Then I DNF'd Butter by Asako Yuzuki. This I had picked up at my local bookstore. And they were like, when I was checking out, they said, oh, this is our book club pick next month if you want to join. And I was like, oh, great. That sounds great. Like, would love to get back into a book club IRL. I have one at work I do, but, with like some strangers who also love books. That sounds great. But I decided I could not make this my first book club outing with them because I did not like the book. And I was like, I can't come into this book club hot saying... I did not like this book. My problem with it is that it's pitched as a serial killer book about this woman who's like a chef killing people, and like this hotshot reporter gets a chance to interview her, and like secrets unfold. And kind of that's what it is, but it just reads sort of like navel-gazy general fiction. Like there wasn't I thought it was a mystery. It's pitched as a mystery or like a crime book. And that's not really the vibe. It's more just sort of navel-gazy fiction. And it's well written. It's like, there's not, I think if that's the kind of book you want, if that sounds interesting, if the things I mentioned to you sound interesting, and you're okay with it being general fiction and a little navel-gazy, then you should read this book, because I think it is well done. It's just not what I was expecting. And so I DNF'd it, because I was like, this is so long for this much just like introspective character work that I'm not that interested in. So yeah, DNF that, and we're going to have to pick another one to go to book club with, because I can't come in hot hating the book. Or not hating, but just like not being into the book. The other book club thing I read this month was Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. This is probably my second favorite thing I read this month. Leanna picked it for our Blades and Bodice Ripper book club. And so if you want to see a full discussion of it, it's over on her channel. It was interesting because it was definitely a split in the group. Like me and Leanna really liked this book. Bethany and Amanda not so much. And it's a very vibe-based book, but I was into the vibes, so I was okay with that. I think that I would have like adored this if it had been a short story. So if like the middle chunk had been reduced, like kind of consolidated, I think it could have been like a 5-star short story for me. But I still think it's really good. It's like a modern classic of Australian literature about this group of schoolgirls in the sort of like late Victorian, early Edwardian period who go out to this like geological anomaly in the bush for a picnic, and then strange things happen. A few of them don't come back. And then like it's kind of just following what is happening to everybody who's left behind after that, and like all the strange things that are happening. So it's a very, like I said, it's very vibey, so very atmospheric. And I think that'll either work for you or not, but it's a lot about subtext, and I found that to be an interesting reading experience. So I like this. I was for this as a pick. Good job, Leanna. I'm glad that this compelled me to pick it up. Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear by Shauna McGuire. I don't really have a lot to say other than it was like good. Like it's another good installment in the Shauna McGuire Wayward Children series. Yeah, I liked it. it's one of the ones that's sort of like it's not really moving the current plot forward. It's sort of going back and finding out the backstory of one of the kids. And this one deals a lot with like disability and international adoption in terms of its like thematic content, which I thought was great. So yeah, I mean, Sean McGuire is always like very consistent in this particular series. So if you like the series, I think you'll like this installment. And then what else did I read? I reread I Married a Minotaur because I just needed something light because my brain has been struggling in the last couple weeks. Okay. I guess the last new thing I read was I read The Suffering Game, Volume 6 of The Adventure Zone, which is a graphic novel series that follows a podcast that I listened to when it was first coming out. So it's very nostalgic to see these like graphic novelizations of a podcast that I loved and that got me into actual play content for D&D. I have played very little D&D in my life. I would love to play more. But I love comedic actual play D&D. That is something I'm very into, and really The Adventure Zone is the one who primed me for that. The Suffering Game arc of that podcast was probably my least favorite in the overall series. So consequently, this is probably my least favorite of the graphic novelizations, but novelizations, is that a word? I don't know. My brain isn't working right. So I gave it 3.5. It's still good, still enjoyable, just like not, to me, that's like a B+. It was good, but not my favorite. So yeah, that was good too. Okay, so I think that wraps up January reading. I'll smoosh this together with December, and we will officially call that, end and beginning of year reading recapped. Let me know what you thought about any of the books that came up in this video. I'll try to remember to link the videos I referenced somewhere, but no promises because brain not great today. But yeah, I hope you are doing well. Please take care of yourself. Please take care of each other. And I will just talk to you soon. Bye.